What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing yet another hero guide, this time focusing on one of the main characters in all of Star Wars, which is Luke Skywalker. Now, to be honest, Luke used to be one of the worst characters in the game back when I first did a Luke hero guide, and so this is probably one of the hero guides I have been most needing to do since he has been buffed heavily since then, and he is arguably one of the better characters in the game right now. If you haven't seen my latest hero guides, then I will leave a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen, so make sure to go and check those ones out as well. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with all of his base stats, and like I mentioned in all of these hero guides, all of these stats have been double checked by both myself and one of my subscribers, and there will be a link in the description where you can find his Reddit post with all of these stats. Now, we both tested these in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure all of these stats will transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer. So if you see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comments. So first off, we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does have pretty much the average health pool for a saber user, coming in at 750. On top of that, he has 200 health regen, which is actually a little lower than the average when compared to the other saber users. However, it is still higher than most blast users, so it's not necessarily bad, but just keep that in the back of your mind at all times. Now, his weapon of choice is actually different depending on which skin you do use, although the stats are exactly the same. His base skin is his own saber that he made between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. However, his Hoth skin actually uses Anakin's saber that was obviously passed down by Obi-Wan in A New Hope. He actually deals some of the lowest damage of all the saber users in the game, dealing only 100 damage from the front and 120 from behind, so he will still 2-hit kill any regular trooper, but it is a noticeable difference against enemy villains. On the other hand, he does actually have a pretty fast swing speed, coming in at 1.7 swings per second, so that does somewhat help balance his low damage output. He has what I would call a medium lunge distance on his saber attacks, and luckily he does have a really high stamina pool too, which again does help counter the low damage output, and he does also have very accurate blaster deflection, so that can be extremely useful to take out troopers with their own blaster bolts. Now, moving on to his abilities, and this is where he definitely does get slightly better, as he does have a pretty decent and well-rounded set of abilities. His L1 ability is his force push, and this causes Luke to push anyone within the area of effect away from himself, and it does only have a 20-second cooldown, which is pretty decent considering how useful the ability can be. Now, it deals 150 damage to both troopers and reinforcements, however it only actually deals 90 damage to enemy villains, so it is definitely a great ability to one-hit kill troopers, but against villains it is definitely not quite as useful. This ability is super useful for quickly clearing large groups of enemies at once without much of a chance of being avoided, and it is also really good in HVV to push enemies off the side of the map. Its only downfall is that it is known to be fairly buggy, so just keep that in mind when using it, because it can often end up resulting in a pretty frustrating death if you are relying on it to survive. Moving on to his L1R1 ability, and this one is called Repulse. Luke force slams the ground, knocking and damaging anyone within the area of effect, and it does only have a 20-second cooldown as well, which is definitely not too bad at all. Similar to the push ability, it does deal less damage to heroes than it does to troopers, dealing 125 to regular classes and 75 to enemy villains. This ability seems to be a perfect finisher to any of his other abilities. If you use his rush attack to deal some initial damage and then use this, it's almost a guaranteed kill to anyone within the area. The only downfall is that, similar to his push, it can often bug out and not register the hit, so again, just keep that in mind at all times. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is his rush attack that I just mentioned, and this one sends Luke rushing forward, swinging his saber and hitting anyone in the way, and it does only have a 5-second cooldown once both rushes have been used too, which is definitely very handy. This one deals 100 damage per hit, and like I said, you will actually have 2 uses in a row before it actually needs to cool down. This ability is especially useful for catching up to enemies who are trying to run away or trying to roll away from your attacks. So it's a very handy finisher, and there is not too much at all that your enemies can actually do to stop it. Its only real weakness is that it can be blocked by lightsabers, but other than that, it's definitely a very handy and very powerful ability. So that's it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with his best star cards for Galactic Assault. Now, obviously it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the 3 or 4 cards that I think are the most important and most well suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is his Cleansing the Darkness star card, and this is his health on kill card. So as you probably all know by now, this awards 20 HP per regular trooper kill and up to 100 HP per villain kill, so this one is definitely a necessity in Galactic Assault. The next card I'd recommend using is the Extended Push Reach card, which, exactly as it sounds, just extends the area of effect of his force push by up to 30% when fully upgraded. With the push being a one-hit kill, I like to use this card as it just makes that ability so much more deadly, and anytime you can buff a one-hit kill ability, then that's definitely going to work in your favour. The third card I'm going to recommend is the Jedi Reflexes card, and this one allows an extra rush attack at the expense of a slightly lower recharge. The extra recharge only works out to be roughly a half a second longer, and so for that extra rush, that is definitely worth equipping the card. Now, these three cards are the three that I personally use almost 100% of the time in Galactic Assault. However, if you are the type of player that relies on his Repulse, then there is another card that can be very handy to use. That card is the Strong Repulse card, and this one just increases the area of effect of his Repulse by up to 30% as well. So like I said, if you find yourself using that ability a lot, then this is definitely another handy card to use for clearing out rooms and stuff like that. Now again, these are just the cards that I personally think are the most useful. However, he does also have some other pretty handy cards as well, so I'd still recommend to test them all out for yourselves and try and figure out which one suits you the best. Although the ones that I have mentioned are just a good place to start if you are not too sure what to choose. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Luke on when you are playing Galactic Assault, and the top three that I've picked are Endor, Yavin 4 and Tatooine. All of these maps really suit his fast playstyle when it comes to running in and amongst the cover, like the trees on Endor or the buildings on Tatooine. And they also allow for a lot of areas where enemies seem to pile up, leaving plenty of opportunities for some nice force push multi-kills. Now obviously this doesn't mean that these are the only three maps that you should choose him on, but these are just my three personal favourite maps that I think suit his playstyle very well. Now moving on to some tips for Galactic Assault, and the main tip I have for Luke is to play very aggressively, yet always have a backup plan in case you do get into trouble, because his low damage output and smaller health regen pool can set you up for a very quick death if you do get yourself stuck in a corner. Now Luke is the type of character where I feel situational awareness is always a necessity. It seems that most of my deaths with Luke come when I get distracted by the action and get far too involved without having that backup plan ready if I do happen to actually get in trouble. It is pretty easy to make that mistake with Luke because all of his abilities combine so well for clearing out areas like the junkyard or cantina on Tatooine. However, if you use all of those abilities and don't make sure to kill every enemy in there, then you are instantly going to be in a lot more trouble than most other saber users. Combining all of his abilities definitely does help in those situations. If you see a group of enemies all together, it's always a good idea to open that with a rush attack and then use your repulse to finish them off, and that should take out almost all the nearby enemies unless they do manage to roll out of the repulse, at which point you should just be okay to finish them off with a saber attack anyway. What I like to do is keep that force push up your sleeve before you do actually use that combination, because then if things do go south, then you still have some one-hit kill potential, which can be a real lifesaver if you are backed up into a corner. Now, with the force push, it's always beneficial to try and aim the push towards a wall rather than out into the open, because let's just say it's a heavy or a reinforcement, and if you push them into the open, then that might not kill them, and then it will also give them space to possibly run away to safety. If you do push them into a wall though, then they'll generally still be within a somewhat close range, and then you can straight away follow with a rush attack and a regular attack as well, and they won't really be able to do much at all. Another tip for the push ability that I almost forgot to mention, because I feel like most people already know this, but I'll throw it in anyway because I'm sure it will help a few of you guys out. But when you use the force push in the air, it actually cancels the animation in a way. When you push while you're on the ground, and even when you're running, it will cause you to stop on the spot for a second, and that can leave you very open to attack. But if you use it while you're jumping, then it will actually work while you're still moving, making it pretty much impossible for enemies to damage you without getting hit with it. Not only that, but it does actually allow you to jump higher too. If you push right before the top of your jump arc, then you'll actually go significantly higher than normal. So this is definitely another handy trick for getting into some high areas that you might not normally be able to make. Overall though, with Luke, he really does suit an in and out type of playstyle, probably more than anyone other than Darth Maul. You never really want to stay in one spot, because when people catch on and start to all gang up at once, then you can just get melted without much of a chance at all. On the other hand though, when you stay on the move and try and flank, outsmart and catch your opponents off guard, then you're going to be very hard to kill with how powerful all of those abilities are in combination. Luke versus 2 or 3 enemies is never going to end well at all for those troopers. Being able to one-hit them all and then just follow up for any survivors with a rush attack is almost unstoppable when there's no one else around to damage you. So if you can do your best to separate the enemy team and then pick them off in small groups, then you're definitely setting yourself up for a very nice kill streak. So hopefully with some practice and some of these tips, you guys can improve your gameplay in Galactic Assault with Luke, as he is easily one of the more enjoyable characters to play, and if you are an aggressive player like myself, then you will have a whole lot of fun once you do get the hang of him. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero vs villain game modes. Now surprisingly, the cards that I use in these modes are the same ones that I use in Galactic Assault, which isn't usually the case in these guides. However, I still just think that these are all generally the most useful cards all round, and so I personally don't really change these up very often at all. There is however an exception, and this one comes into play on maps without ledges such as Kashyyyk and Kamino and any map like that. This card, which goes perfectly with the other force push card that I mentioned earlier, is the stronger push star card. This one gives his force push up to an extra 100% knockback effect, meaning you can pretty much push enemies twice as far as normal, and so on maps with no ledges this is absolutely perfect at knocking unsuspecting enemies off the edge of the map. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and honestly, just like most of the other Saber users, Luke is pretty self-explanatory in these modes, as a lot of the tips I could give have already been touched on in the Galactic Assault section of the video. You need to always keep in mind that he does deal a lot less damage against villains, not only with his Saber attacks, but also with those force abilities, as they both have significant damage drop-offs when used against villains. Because of this, you do definitely need to play a little bit safer and smarter, combining quick attack sequences with dodges and rush attacks, so that your enemies are always struggling to land any hits on you. If you land a strike on an enemy, use your rush attack straight away to quickly get in another, as well as then get to the other side of their body, and then from there you can either try and land another hit straight away, or if they are blocking, then try and dash around until they open themselves up with an attack, at which point you can then just use another rush attack and pretty much just rinse and repeat. You never want to get yourself into a proper Saber battle in terms of blocking and attacking back and forth, unless it is against maybe Maul or maybe even Kylo, but that is still a little bit dangerous now that he has been given a buff. If you do find yourself in those types of Saber battles, then things can go south very quickly, and with such a low damage output you're instantly at a huge disadvantage, because let's just say you and Grievous both hit each other 5 times, you'll deal 500 damage while he'll deal 650 with his added 30 damage per swing. So you never want to trade blows with anyone in the game, otherwise you're almost guaranteed to die every single time. Now, as for some characters to look out for in these modes, and the only genuine threats I would say are Vader and Grievous, just because they are such tanks compared to Luke, so you do need to play it very safely against these guys compared to most others in the game. This definitely isn't to say that you can't beat either of these guys, but for the most part, a very good Vader or Grievous player will generally beat a very good Luke player, so long as they don't go too aggressive, so that does lead me on to how to defeat them. Your best bet as Luke is almost to bait these guys, and really any Saber user for that matter, into getting angry and starting to leave their guard down, at which point you can then do that dash and rush attack method like I mentioned earlier. This is also really helpful on maps with no ledges, as the easiest way to get rid of a strong character is just to one-hit kill them, which you can do with your force push on these kinds of maps. As for blaster heroes, they generally shouldn't trouble you too much because you do have some form of range with a force push, and so you should for the most part be able to handle pretty much any blaster user without too much trouble at all. Combining all of these tips with sticking close to your teammates and playing as a team, and you'll have no trouble at all with Luke in these game modes, as when he's played properly he's definitely much better than most people give him credit for. So that is going to be it for our Luke hero guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips will help you guys out, as he is definitely a very fun character to play when you do get the hang of him, as well as being arguably one of the better light side characters in the game. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. I am currently working on getting some more footage for the next hero guide, so I'm not 100% sure who will be next, but keep an eye on the channel because there is definitely plenty more to come on their way soon. If you are new to the channel, then definitely feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.